If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. An evening discovery. The ruins of Phaistos stretched across the Cretan hillside in July 1908, a maze of ancient walls and chambers that had once housed Minoan royalty. Luigi Pernier's Italian archaeological team had been working methodically through the palace complex for weeks, following the careful procedures expected of European excavations. The northeastern complex presented particular challenges, with its rooms filled with debris from multiple historical periods that had collapsed and mixed together over millennia. Room 101 sat within this complex, a modest chamber that showed clear signs of ancient fire damage. The official excavation records describe systematic work during daylight hours, with teams of local workers removing soil and rubble under archaeological supervision. Standard practice required each significant find to be photographed in place, measured, and recorded before removal. The daily logs documented pottery fragments, bronze tools, and stone vessels emerging from the destruction layers. Yet the disc appeared during an evening inspection rather than the routine morning work. This timing meant fewer people were present and normal documentation procedures were not in place. How could such an extraordinary artifact surface when the usual safeguards were absent? The contrast between daytime protocol and evening discovery would later raise questions about whether proper archaeological standards had been maintained when the most important find of the season came to light. On July 3, 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier was resting in his quarters when his local foreman, Zacharias Iliakis, approached with urgent news. The Cretan worker had been overseeing the evening work in room 101 when something unusual emerged from the debris. Pernier later described being awakened from his afternoon rest and following Iliakis to the excavation area, where the clay disc lay exposed in the ancient destruction layer. This sequence of events created an immediate problem for the archaeological record. No trained archaeologist witnessed the disc being removed from the earth. Iliakis, despite his experience working Mediterranean excavations, was not a credentialed archaeologist. His word became the foundation for everything that followed regarding the disc's discovery context. The relationship between Pernier and his foreman represented the standard hierarchy of early 20th century excavations. European directors relied heavily on local supervisors who understood the terrain and could manage work crews. Iliakis had worked previous seasons at Phaistos and earned Pernier's trust. Yet this personal dynamic meant that crucial details about the disc's position and surroundings passed through a single individual whose account could not be independently verified. How much did Pernier truly know about what happened before he arrived at room 101? The archaeological record shows only what Iliakis reported to his supervisor, creating gaps that would later fuel suspicions about the discovery's authenticity. The clay disc emerged from what archaeologists call a destruction layer, the collapsed remains of buildings destroyed by fire or earthquake around 1450 BCE. But this layer at Phaistos had suffered centuries of additional damage. Later occupants had built new structures on top, digging foundations that cut through the original Minoan remains. Roman builders had also disturbed the area, creating a complex mix of materials from different time periods. Context means everything in archaeology. When artifacts sit undisturbed in their original positions, surrounded by objects from the same period, archaeologists can establish reliable dates and understand how people actually used these items. The disc's reported location offered none of these advantages. The destruction layer had been so thoroughly mixed that pottery fragments from centuries apart lay side by side. Pernier's excavation notes mention some pottery sherds and other small finds near the disc, but these descriptions lack the precise measurements and stratigraphic details that modern archaeologists require. No photographs documented the disc's exact position or its relationship to surrounding objects. Later scholars, trying to verify the discovery, had to work from brief written summaries rather than detailed field records. This compromised context became the first crack in the disc's credibility. Without secure stratigraphic evidence, how could anyone prove the disc belonged to ancient Crete rather than someone's workshop? The most striking fact about the Phaistos disc discovery is this: nobody saw it happen. When Pernier arrived at room 101 that evening in 1908, the disc was already exposed, sitting in disturbed soil that his foreman claimed to have just cleared. No trained archaeologist witnessed the disc emerging from the earth. No photographer captured its position. No surveyor mapped its exact location within the room. This absence of witnesses creates a fundamental problem. In archaeology, the moment of discovery is everything. The position of an object, its relationship to surrounding materials, and the layer it comes from provide crucial evidence about its age and authenticity. Without these details, even the most spectacular artifact becomes difficult to verify. Modern excavations would have multiple team members present, extensive photography, and detailed drawings before any important object was moved. The early 1900s operated differently. Pernier relied heavily on his local workers and often worked with minimal supervision. Small teams and limited resources meant that many discoveries lacked the documentation we would expect today. Yet even by the standards of that era, the disc's discovery seems unusually isolated. No assistant archaeologist confirmed the find. No visiting scholar happened to be present. The chain of evidence depends entirely on the word of two men who had strong professional reasons to want the excavation to succeed. How does one verify a discovery that nobody actually witnessed? The isolated artifact. The Phaistos disc measures about 6 inches across and catches the eye immediately with its perfect spiral pattern. Someone pressed 45 different symbols into wet clay using individual stamps, creating 2 matching spirals that wind from the outside edge toward the center on both faces. Each stamp left a clear, crisp impression that shows remarkable consistency throughout the entire disc. The symbols themselves tell a fascinating story. Human figures stride across the clay surface alongside animals that look like fish, birds, and what might be cattle. Tools appear frequently: axes, shields, and mysterious objects that could be weapons or farming implements. Plant-like designs mix with geometric shapes and structures that might represent buildings or ships. Yet these 45 signs create something completely separate from every other writing system found in ancient Crete. Most ancient scripts follow straight lines across tablets or stones. The Phaistos disc breaks this rule entirely. Its spiral design forces readers to rotate the disc as they follow the symbols, creating an almost hypnotic reading experience. This deliberate visual choice suggests the maker had something special in mind, perhaps a ceremonial text or an experimental approach to recording information. What makes this arrangement even more puzzling is how professional it looks. The stamps created uniform, readable symbols that flow smoothly around each spiral. Someone invested serious time and skill into making this disc. Yet no other examples of this writing system exist anywhere in the archaeological record. Alone in the archaeological record, this remarkable disc stands completely alone. Despite decades of searching, researchers have never found another artifact displaying the same writing system. The isolation troubles experts because ancient scripts typically appear on multiple objects. When archaeologists discover a new form of writing, they usually find it carved into stone monuments, painted on pottery, or pressed into clay tablets across several sites. The Phaistos disk defies this pattern entirely. Scholars tried connecting its symbols to known Mediterranean writing systems. They compared the signs to Linear A, the undeciphered Minoan script, and Linear B, which records early Greek. They examined Egyptian hieroglyphs and Mesopotamian cuneiform for similarities. Every attempt failed. The disk's symbols remain stubbornly unique, sharing no clear connections with any documented writing system from the ancient world. This creates a serious problem for linguists. Without parallel texts, they cannot analyze how often specific symbols appear or how they function within words. A single inscription provides no context for understanding grammar, syntax, or meaning. Researchers need multiple examples to identify patterns and crack unknown scripts. Later excavations at Phaistos and nearby sites uncovered thousands of pottery fragments and clay objects. Many bore impressed marks or symbols, raising hopes that similar artifacts might surface. Yet none displayed the complete system of signs found on the disk, leaving it stranded without companions in the archaeological record. The technique used to create the disk presents another puzzle that challenges our understanding of ancient writing methods. Each symbol on the disk was made using what appears to be an individual stamp, pressed into the soft clay before firing. This means someone created 45 separate stamps, each carrying a unique design, and used them repeatedly to build the spiral text. This approach differs dramatically from how other Minoan texts were produced. Linear A tablets from the same period show symbols carved by hand, each letter individually scratched into the clay surface. Even cylinder seals, which used repetitive impressions, typically contained complete scenes or identifying marks rather than individual letters of an alphabet. The disk's creator essentially invented a primitive printing system centuries before such technology appeared elsewhere. The implications of this stamped method raise important questions about intent. Why would someone go through the effort of creating dozens of individual stamps unless they plan to use them repeatedly? This suggests the maker may have intended to produce multiple disks or texts using the same symbol set. Yet no other examples have ever been found, leaving us with evidence of a sophisticated system that apparently produced only one surviving example. Such careful preparation for mass production, followed by apparent abandonment, strikes some researchers as suspicious. Would an ancient scribe really develop this elaborate technique for a single text? The disk's complete isolation in the archaeological record creates a perfect storm for controversy. Genuine ancient artifacts sometimes stand alone when they represent failed experiments or limited practices that never took hold. The wealthy palace at Phaistos certainly had resources to support experimental writing systems or ritual objects that might have been used only briefly before being abandoned. Archaeological sites regularly produce one-of-a-kind items that reflect local innovations or special purposes. Yet this same uniqueness appeals strongly to forgers who understand that extraordinary objects generate the most interest while avoiding easy detection through comparison. A clever modern creator would naturally seek to produce something that appears ancient but stands apart from known examples, making verification nearly impossible. The disk achieves exactly this balance between familiarity and novelty. Scholars find themselves weighing equally plausible explanations. The stamping technique suggests preparation for multiple texts, yet only one disk survives. The symbols appear carefully designed, but connect to no broader writing tradition. Such contradictions could reflect genuine ancient experimentation or modern deception. The disk cannot be judged as text alone. Its isolation defines the mystery as much as its contents do. The impossible decipherment. The problem with cracking the disk's code comes down to simple math. The entire artifact contains only 241 to 242 individual symbols, spread across just 45 different sign types. This creates a massive barrier that has frustrated researchers for over a century. When Michael Ventris successfully decoded Linear B in the 1950s, he had thousands of tablets to work with. These large collections allowed him to spot patterns, identify word breaks, and track how symbols changed in different contexts. He could test his theories against multiple examples and gradually build a working understanding of the ancient Greek language hidden in the script. The Phaistos disk offers no such luxury. With barely 200 symbols total, researchers cannot establish reliable statistical patterns or identify meaningful repetitions. They cannot determine where words begin and end, or how the grammar might work. Each proposed solution remains impossible to verify because there simply isn't enough text to cross-check any theory. This shortage of data means that every claimed decipherment becomes pure speculation. Without additional examples of the script, no one can prove their reading is correct or disprove a rival interpretation. Despite the lack of reliable data, dozens of researchers have stepped forward with confident claims about what the disk actually says. These proposed readings cover an extraordinary range of topics and languages. Some scholars believe they have found ancient hymns or religious prayers. Others insist the disk contains astronomical calculations or calendar information. Still others claim it records legal documents, military reports, or navigation instructions. Each new interpretation follows a predictable pattern. The would-be decoder picks a favorite language family and assigns sounds to the mysterious symbols based on what they want the message to say. Indo-European enthusiasts see early Greek or Proto-Celtic words. Semitic language supporters find Hebrew or Phoenician roots. Researchers focused on Anatolian languages discover Luwian or Hittite connections. The symbols somehow bend to fit whatever linguistic framework the decoder brings to the table. These interpretations contradict each other completely. One scholar's religious hymn becomes another's trade agreement. A calendar system transforms into a war chronicle. The same sequence of symbols can apparently mean entirely different things depending on who claims to have cracked the code. This chaos explains why mainstream archaeology views all proposed solutions with deep suspicion. Without a bilingual text or additional examples to test these theories, each confident translation amounts to educated guesswork dressed up as scholarship. Researchers studying the disk have discovered something even stranger than the endless failed translations. When certain symbols are mapped according to their positions, they form regular geometric patterns that seem too organized to appear randomly in normal text. The most striking example involves seven-sided arrangements that repeat across different sections of the spiral. These heptagonal patterns emerge when scholars trace the placement of specific sign groups. No known writing system produces such mathematical regularity by accident. Languages have their own rhythms and structures, but they rarely create perfect geometric shapes when their words are plotted spatially. This observation creates a troubling question. Either the disc represents a completely unique type of text that blends writing with geometric encoding, or someone designed it specifically to create these mysterious patterns. The geometric arrangements have split researchers into opposing camps. Some believe they point to a sophisticated ancient system that combined astronomy, mathematics, and religious symbolism in ways we cannot yet understand. Others see them as evidence of deliberate fabrication. A skilled forger could easily arrange symbols to create intriguing patterns while ensuring the text remained permanently undecipherable. These mathematical curiosities have attracted conspiracy theorists and amateur codebreakers who claim the disk contains hidden cosmic knowledge. Meanwhile, skeptical archaeologists view the same patterns as red flags, suggesting modern manufacture rather than ancient wisdom. Most scholars know what it takes to crack an ancient script. You need multiple texts written in the same language, preferably with bilingual inscriptions that include a known language. You need enough examples to spot patterns, test theories, and eliminate false leads. The Phaistos disk offers none of these tools. Consider how other scripts were successfully decoded. Linear B yielded its secrets because archaeologists found thousands of clay tablets scattered across multiple palace sites. Scholars could compare administrative records, spot repeated words, and gradually piece together the grammar of ancient Greek. Egyptian hieroglyphs fell to the Rosetta Stone, which provided the same text in 3 different scripts. Even then, decipherment took decades of careful work. The disk stands alone. No other examples of its script exist anywhere in the Mediterranean world. No bilingual texts bridge the gap between its mysterious symbols and any known language. Without these external anchors, every proposed solution becomes an exercise in creative interpretation rather than scientific analysis. This isolation creates a perfect storm for wishful thinking. The human brain excels at finding patterns, even in random data. When someone stares at the disk long enough, convinced they can solve archaeology's greatest puzzle, the symbols start to whisper familiar words. Ancient Greek appears to one scholar, while another hears Semitic languages or prehistoric European dialects. Each interpretation sounds convincing in isolation, but crumbles when compared to competing theories. The Forgery Accusation. In 2008, exactly 100 years after Luigi Pernier first pulled the disk from the ground at Phaistos, Jerome Eisenberg made a shocking public accusation. The New York-based antiquities dealer and expert in ancient art forgeries declared that archaeology's most famous undeciphered artifact was nothing more than an elaborate hoax. Eisenberg had spent decades identifying fake antiquities for museums and collectors worldwide. His trained eye had exposed countless fraudulent pieces that had fooled other experts. Eisenberg's argument struck at the heart of what made the disk so captivating. He pointed out that genuine ancient artifacts typically fit into established patterns of their time and place. They share techniques, styles, and symbols with other objects from the same period. The Phaistos disk stood completely alone. No other Minoan object used movable type printing. No similar spiral texts had ever been found anywhere in the ancient Mediterranean world. The timing of the discovery also troubled Eisenberg. The disk appeared during the early days of Minoan archaeology, when documentation standards were far looser than today. Pernier controlled every aspect of the find and its initial study. Most damaging of all, Eisenberg noted that the disk's unique features would have been nearly impossible for ancient forgers to fake, but relatively simple for a skilled modern craftsman to create. Eisenberg's accusations demanded a closer look at Luigi Pernier himself. Why would a respected archaeologist risk his career by creating a fake artifact? The answer might lie in the competitive world of early 20th century archaeology, where spectacular discoveries could make or break professional reputations. Career ambition provided the most obvious motive. Pernier was working at Phaistos, under the shadow of more famous archaeologists like Arthur Evans, who had gained international recognition for his work at Knossos. A unique discovery like the disc would instantly elevate Pernier's status and secure his place in archaeological history. The Italian government was also investing heavily in Cretan excavations, and pressure to produce significant finds would have been intense. Pernier certainly possessed the necessary skills to create such an object. As an experienced archaeologist, he understood Minoan artistic conventions and had access to genuine artifacts for reference. He would have known local clay sources and traditional firing techniques still used by Cretan potters. Most importantly, he controlled the excavation site and documentation process completely. The opportunity was undeniable. Working conditions at Phaistos in 1908 were far from the carefully monitored excavations of today. Pernier worked with minimal oversight and could easily have planted the disc in the excavation area. Yet many respected scholars vehemently reject these accusations against Pernier and the disc. These defenders point out a crucial flaw in the forgery theory. If someone created this object in 1908, they would have needed knowledge about Minoan civilization that simply did not exist at the time. The iconography on the disc matches artistic traditions that archaeologists only discovered decades later through subsequent excavations across Crete. Professor Gareth Owens, a computational linguist who has studied the disc extensively, argues that its symbols display sophisticated internal consistency. The repeated patterns and careful spacing suggest genuine linguistic structure rather than random decoration. He notes that creating such systematic complexity would require linguistic expertise far beyond what any forger in 1908 could reasonably possess. The technical execution also supports authenticity claims. Clay analysis reveals firing techniques consistent with Bronze Age pottery found elsewhere in the region. Modern attempts to recreate similar stamped clay tablets have proven surprisingly difficult, even with contemporary tools and knowledge. Perhaps most compelling is the sheer audacity such a forgery would require. Pernier risked his entire professional reputation on this single discovery. Why would an established archaeologist jeopardize everything for a hoax that could easily be exposed by future scientific testing? The stakes extend far beyond academic arguments about clay and symbols. The Heraklion Archaeological Museum has displayed the Phaistos disc as one of its crown jewels for over a century. Thousands of visitors each year photograph this artifact, purchase replicas in gift shops, and leave believing they have encountered genuine Bronze Age mystery. Museum officials understand that admitting error would damage institutional credibility and potentially reduce tourism revenue that helps fund ongoing excavations across Crete. Professional reputations hang in the balance as well. Archaeologists who have spent careers studying the disc, writing papers about its significance, and building theories around its authenticity face uncomfortable questions. If Eisenberg's accusations prove correct, decades of scholarly work would require fundamental revision. Some researchers have invested so heavily in the disc's legitimacy that acknowledging forgery would essentially invalidate their life's work. The implications stretch beyond this single artifact. Early 20th century archaeology operated under vastly different standards than today's rigorous documentation protocols. if investigators conclusively proved the disc was fabricated. Similar doubts would inevitably surface about other famous discoveries from that era. How many celebrated artifacts might crumble under modern scrutiny? The forgery debate forces archaeologists to confront whether their field's foundational discoveries can withstand contemporary investigation methods. The evidence that divides. In 1955, nearly half a century after Pernier's discovery, archaeologists working at the Palace of Cato Zakros made a find that would breathe new life into arguments for the disc's authenticity. They recovered a small clay ceiling, bearing what appeared to be a distinctly familiar symbol. The marking looked remarkably similar to what researchers had dubbed the comb sign. On the Phaistos disc, a symbol resembling a simple comb with vertical lines extending downward from a horizontal bar. This discovery carried enormous implications for the authenticity debate. If a modern forger had created the disc in the early 1900s, how could they have predicted a symbol that wouldn't surface elsewhere until decades later? The ceiling came from a legitimate archaeological context, found by different researchers at a different site with no connection to Pernier or the Italian mission. Then came the Mavro Spilio ring, discovered in 1928 at a tomb near Knossos. This small golden ring featured an inscription arranged in a spiral pattern, much like the disc's text. The writing moved from the outside edge toward the center in a continuous curve. While the symbols differed completely from those on the disc, the spiral layout suggested that this method of organizing text wasn't foreign to Bronze Age Crete. How could critics explain these unexpected parallels? The evidence seemed to work against the forgery theory in ways nobody had anticipated. The scientific world had developed a technique that could potentially answer the fundamental question about the Phaistos disc once and for all. Thermoluminescence dating works by measuring the last time clay was heated to high temperatures, such as when a potter fires a ceramic object in a kiln. The process examines tiny crystals within the clay that accumulate energy from natural radiation over time. When heated, these crystals release their stored energy as light. By measuring how much energy has built up since the last firing, scientists can determine when the object was made. The test would require removing only a small sample from the disc's edge, perhaps no larger than a grain of rice. The results could establish whether the clay was fired in 1700 BC or 1900 AD. Such precision would settle the authenticity debate immediately. Yet despite decades of requests from researchers worldwide, the authorities at the Heraklion Archaeological Museum have consistently refused to authorize the test. Officials cite concerns about damaging this unique artifact, arguing that even a tiny sample could harm something irreplaceable. Critics suggest deeper fears drive the resistance. What if the test revealed a modern date? The embarrassment would extend far beyond one institution, potentially casting doubt on other early discoveries and shaking confidence in established archaeological practices. This missing test has become central to the mystery itself. The absence of definitive dating keeps the disc suspended between genuine relic and elaborate hoax. The archaeological community remains deeply divided over the disc's authenticity, creating two distinct camps that rarely agree on basic facts. Many respected archaeologists accept the disc as genuine, incorporating it into their studies of Minoan civilization and Bronze Age writing systems. They point to the sophisticated craftsmanship, the consistency of the symbols, and the parallels with other Cretan artifacts as evidence of ancient origin. Other scholars maintain serious doubts about the discovery circumstances and Luigi Pernier's documentation. They argue that the lack of proper excavation records and the suspicious timing of the find make authenticity impossible to verify. This skeptical group often avoids mentioning the disk in their research, treating it as too problematic to include in serious academic work. Popular media has amplified the most sensational aspects of the mystery, often presenting wild theories about lost civilizations or alien contact that overshadow careful scholarly analysis. These dramatic interpretations attract public attention, but frustrate researchers trying to examine the evidence objectively. Social media and documentary films frequently ignore the genuine scientific questions in favor of more exciting speculation. The disk currently exists in an unusual position within archaeology. It receives neither full acceptance nor complete rejection, remaining suspended between these extremes while new discoveries slowly accumulate around it. The most pressing question remains simple: what would actually solve this mystery? Scientists agree that finding a second object with the same script would change everything. Even a small clay tablet or seal bearing just a few matching symbols would prove the writing system existed beyond this single disk. Such a discovery would make forgery nearly impossible to maintain. Thermoluminescence testing could provide another path to resolution. The technique would reveal when the clay was last heated, potentially confirming or destroying the ancient date. Yet, museum officials continue to refuse this analysis, citing preservation concerns. Their reluctance has itself become evidence in the debate, with skeptics arguing that authentic artifacts should withstand scientific scrutiny. The broader implications extend beyond archaeology. The Phaistos disk controversy reveals how institutional pride, national identity, and academic reputation can complicate objective research. Museums invested in famous artifacts may resist tests that could diminish their collections. Scholars who built careers on certain interpretations face professional pressure to defend their positions. Perhaps the disk will remain forever ambiguous, a permanent reminder that some questions resist definitive answers. This uncertainty challenges our modern expectation that science can resolve every mystery through enough analysis and evidence.